You would describe that pattern by using parentheses. In Neo4j, whenever you see a pair of parentheses around something, you realize that that's actually talking about a node. You can imagine, like, if you were just trying to describe, the graph that you're talking about to a friend, this is exactly what you would type into an email. You would just use parentheses because they kind of look rounded, right? So if you have from that single node, you now want to, of course, have more than that single node. The easiest thing you can do is just continue to add nodes, and that's a perfectly valid graph. Graphs don't have to be connected to actually be a graph. All you need to do is store data records in each of the nodes, and now you have a graph database of just pure nodes. But to take real advantage of the graphiness of your data, you start to take those nodes and connect them to one another. Of course, if you were just drawing that, you would have one node in a circle, a line, and an arrow pointing to another node, and now you've connected these two nodes. Thinking about that as a query pattern, you would go back to using the parentheses. You would have parentheses around one node, and then dash dash, and then angle brackets, and then the other node also in parentheses. You've now described a pattern from possibly some A to some other B node. Now, if you're doing a query, when you're doing a query, of course, you're looking through the graph for matches of these patterns. So we've just described a simple two-node pattern, some A that's related to some B. If you don't really care about the B, all you really care about is finding A's that have relationships to some B's or to some other nodes that you don't care about, you don't have to give a name to that node. So in Neo4j, with the Cypher query language, you would still have parentheses around your A, a dash dash, an arrow, and then just some empty parentheses, and that's a perfectly valid query. Now, if you're doing a graph query, as we're describing these patterns and these different forms of graphs, sometimes what you're interested in is not the nodes, but actually the relationships between nodes. So of course, if you're drawing this, you would still have a circle and a line connected to some other circle. But if it's that line in between that you're interested in, you would just give that a name. For instance, of course, you would just write a little letter R on it. In a graph query, if you're typing that out in Cypher, you just use dash dash and then square brackets in between the dashes to actually designate that you want to say something about the relationships in between. Now when you're running that query, you can actually capture the relationship and actually find what the type of A is to B. If you continue along that idea and we're just elaborating on different ways of expressing graph patterns. So we have some A that is related to some other nodes, and we now can say, we can capture the relationship in between if we're interested in finding out what that is. But if we already know that we're interested in A's that have a particular kind of relationship to some other nodes, let's say that we have a movie database, so we're looking for actors. How do you know that somebody's an actor? You know that they're an actor because they have acted in some movie. So they have a relationship to the movie that is acted in. So the way you, of course, write that is, again, you have your circle, you've got the line, but now you're going to specify that you have an acted-in relationship. You specify that in Neo4j with Cypher by having the colon and then saying in all caps acted in. And now when Neo4j runs that query looking for those patterns, it's going to only match patterns that have a acted-in relationship between something and something else. Of course, we'll end up knowing that the two things are an actor and some movie. If you're not sure about the data that you have, and rather than look through the entire data set, it's possible not only to sort of filter the possibilities based on the relationship types, but of course you know a little bit about the nodes involved in things. If this was a movie data set, you know that you have people and you have movies. So if you're looking for a particular person, you can say, all right, this A that I'm looking for is a person. So with Neo4j, you can just say the nodes that I want to match in this pattern are only person nodes. So I want to find person nodes that have outgoing relationships and perhaps also have acted in. So I'm looking for people that have acted in some movies, in case you want to filter out, dogs. Rin Tin Tin shouldn't show up in the results. You want to find just people who have acted in movies.